honestly, I think you could summarize it as simply operating with integrity. Like that blows people's minds.
All right, brother. I appreciate you coming on here.
Yeah, man, glad to be here. I also have a coffee. You might know these people.
I do. I do know those people.
Yeah, you may have an insider's track.
Okay, so this is going to be, like I said before, we're going to start with your background, and then we're going to go into what your day-to-day is like and the industry trends that you're seeing, what your current challenges are, and then from there we'll just see how the conversation goes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll give you some background real quick.
Yeah. What's your name? What you do?
Yeah, so my name is Brett. I live here in Louisville, Kentucky. I, for the last 20 years, have been in what I just consider at large construction management. So growing up, I did like building things. I appreciated like heavy equipment, moving dirt. My dad has sold Caterpillar for over 30 years now. And so literally his job is selling the huge excavators, dozers, earth moving equipment. And so I had a desire in high school, coming into college, to be involved in construction. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I started in high school actually working for a home builder and was doing like actual labor, like on the ground construction. And eventually through my dad, who, like I said, has sold Caterpillar heavy equipment for a long time, I had an opportunity to get a job with a grading, paving, and concrete subcontractor in Arizona, which is where I was living at the time and spent a lot of my life. And so at that point, it's funny to me when I look back, because I had, beyond the idea of my dad selling earth moving equipment, I didn't really know what grading contractors did or asphalt subcontractors did or even concrete subcontractors. I mean, I understood that the curb and sidewalk is made of concrete and our roads are made of asphalt, and someone's got to prepare the site with the grading. But in terms of how all of that actually happened and what did those companies kind of do in and out on a day-to-day basis, I had no idea. And so I essentially got a job as what is called a take-off technician in some circles, but essentially it's like an estimator who is doing the initial legwork to get all the quantities together so that the estimator can actually put a bid with cost together. And so it was 20 years ago that I started learning how to read construction plans, specifically civil plans, the grading plan specifically, and how to use a takeoff software to essentially figure out on these grading plans how much dirt are we going to have to move on this particular job. So say it's a new subdivision or it's a new commercial development, it's 30 acres, there's 100,000 cubic yards of dirt that has to be moved, and all of this other data that would be needed from the takeoff to then give to the estimator so that he could actually figure out, hey, if it's a 30-acre site and it's covered in trees that we've got to like cut down and haul away to the dump or wherever, it's going to cost this much. And if there's 100,000 cubic yards of dirt that has to be moved on this site, and say we're going to charge $3 a cubic yard to move it, well, right there's $300,000 just in moving that dirt. And so there's all kinds of data that's needed from the takeoffs to then go to the estimator. And so I was just really blessed with a guy who was willing to sit down with me and teach me how to do the takeoffs really well. And more than learning how to use the software, which is called AgTech. That's the brand of software that I've been using for about 20 years now. It's plug and play with AutoCAD, which is widely used. But yeah, more than even teaching me how to use AgTech, that first boss that I had taught me how to read the blueprints and how to like open up a set of grading plans and be able to understand like, okay, these plans, even though it's like a two-dimensional piece of paper that I'm staring at, this shows a 3D topography of the existing surface. It also shows the 3D design of whatever's going to go there, whether it's a new community of homes, if it's a new commercial development with big buildings and a parking lot, maybe it's a new road. And so learning how to actually read and understand the plans was crucial. And yeah, really the kind of long story short is started out just doing the takeoffs to give to the estimator, and then eventually became an estimator and that's been really helpful in the sense that there are estimators who are really good at what they do, but they actually don't know how to do the takeoffs. They don't know how to use the software like AgTech or whatever software package someone would use. They rely on the takeoff guys to do the takeoffs. And so you'll have estimators, again, who are good at what they do, but they're kind of in limbo until their takeoff guy or takeoff department produces all the info they need to actually be able to do the estimate. Whereas I was blessed to learn how to do it all. So like I can do my own takeoffs, do my own bid. And then one of the other things that's been super helpful and even a lot of fun over the last 20 years is not ending with the estimate, but when we win jobs, because like we'll bid jobs, obviously we don't win all of them, but when we do win the job, I've also learned how to do the project management to where, okay, it went from I did my takeoff, I put the bid together, we were successful, now we're signing a contract with this general contractor to actually do this work. And so now I'm going to work with our field guys, our superintendents, our foremen, our operators even, to kind of give them an overview of the job that we've been awarded, show them the things in the plans that caught my attention during the bid process that they're definitely going to need to be aware of when it comes time to actually do the work in the field. And if there's any issues like maybe an engineering bust or something that would be really good for us to kind of work through on the front end, I start having all of those conversations with the civil engineer, the general contractor that we're ultimately working for, to kind of get stuff remediated prior to us actually moving equipment onto the site and starting to move dirt. Because once the equipment's on site, we really want to be moving dirt continuously, because depending on the size of the fleet that we have on a particular job site, if that stuff is just sitting there, I mean, it literally can be thousands of dollars an hour that you're like absorbing if that equipment is not moving. And so, yeah, blessed to be able to not only do the estimating stuff, but also to learn the project management side. And the last piece that's been a lot of fun, especially thinking about you and technology and kind of where we're going with this, a lot of the machines now for grading especially have GPS systems on them. And so traditionally, the way that a company like the companies that I've worked for 20 years would go out and actually move dirt is we would hire a surveyor who would go out with his or her GPS equipment, and then they would essentially pound in these wood stakes all over the site. And those wood stakes would then have their writing on it in terms of like how much dirt to excavate at that stake, or how much dirt needs to actually be filled at that stake. And they'll use different color code systems, maybe even ribbon and stuff like that. But essentially, they would pound these stakes all over the site. And so let's just say that this new job is a residential subdivision. So these stakes would essentially show where the roads are, where the individual pads are, where the homes eventually are going to be built, where are like your park detention areas, where essentially it's going to be a big green belt, but that's also where the rainwater would drain and stuff like that. And so those wood stakes with all the color coding essentially communicate to the operators like what they need to do where. And like that's been something that has been standard for many decades. What's exciting now with the GPS equipment on the machines is a lot of our operators now actually have a computer screen in the cab, and that computer is integrated with like the hydraulics, and there's GPS antennas, and they're literally communicating with satellites. And part of what I'll do is not only bid the job and help manage the job, but I'll build a model using that same software AgTech of the grading plan, and I can actually load that file into the computers on our machines that have those like upgraded systems. And rather than our guys needing to have stakes everywhere in order to know what's where and to be able to excavate and fill as needed to like get to the plan design, now they actually see the site on their screen and everything's connected. So literally in real time, as they're moving dirt, let's say they're in an area where they're cutting out a detention basin and they drive over it, it'll say you've got 10 feet to dig down to get to the right grade for the plans. And as they're excavating in real time, it's telling them like 10 feet, 9.5 feet, 9 feet, 8.5 feet. Because at the end of the day, for grading companies like us, it all is bid and comes down to how fast can you move the dirt and how efficiently can you move the dirt. And so, yeah, that technology is also really cool. Having the guys like able to see on their screen in real time what needs to be done. And we'll still get some survey, like some wood stakes set up around the site just as like check-in points to make sure that everything is good. But that GPS technology on a lot of the machines is definitely becoming the standard, if not already is a standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about your part where you mentioned that you not only learned how to do the takeoff, but you also can do the estimating, so you can combine the two. And you were talking about how even estimators that are really good at their job have to wait on the takeoff part if they don't know how to do that. So I'm sure that helps you get bids. Once you get a request for a bid, I'm sure it helps you, and you get the plans, it helps you get those bids out much faster than people that are having to wait for another person.
Definitely. And what's been cool too is like I noticed that you can have takeoff guys that are so good at what they do, but beyond the takeoff, beyond having all the quantities that are going to be used in the estimate, they don't understand at all how that translates to like the overall cost, the bid that's essentially going to go out. And that's where I've learned that even when you have guys who are incredible at the take, there's still a ceiling, if you will, that they're going to hit because they don't know what goes into the actual estimate and what's kind of driving all of that, which I would say ends up limiting even how good they could be at the takeoffs. And then the same way with estimators, where you can have an absolutely incredible estimator, but because he doesn't know what goes into the takeoffs, I feel like there's a ceiling there too that they hit. And so obviously when you have people, which I'm not unique, like there are tons of guys who are able to do their own takeoffs and do their own estimates. But yeah, when there's just that flow of like, I've done the takeoff, and in order for me to do the takeoff well, like I've got to read the plans, I've got to read the geotechnical report, which essentially is like the investigation of all the different types of soil and strata below the surface. And all of that is crucial for me to be able to do the takeoff well. So when I move into the estimate, I've already done a ton of the legwork, like that the estimator would have to do even if someone else was doing the takeoff. And so in that kind of setup where you've got a takeoff guy and an estimator, both of them essentially are having to do the full discovery process with reading the plans, reading the geotechnical report, going through everything, which that can be helpful too, having two eyes on it. But it's been nice for me where I just do it all as I kind of work through it, and it's kind of like in-house, if you will. Yeah,
absolutely. Totally makes sense. So typically, depending upon the size of the job, what would you say is the amount of time from when you get the blueprints to when you're able to send out a bid? How many hours, depending on the size of the job, obviously, does it take you to finish that?
Yeah, so if I was given plans for a job, let's just say it's a 10-acre commercial development with some large buildings, maybe it's like a Target and a big parking lot or whatever. If I had the plans and the geotechnical report and the plans were good, not all plans are the same. So let's just assume that everything is good and organized and clean. I could do a whole bid, start to finish, reading everything, doing the takeoff, and then putting it all together in like a cost estimate, a bid. If I had an uninterrupted 8 hours, I could do it in 8 hours. Now, in recent years, I'm helping manage all of our estimating, takeoffs, models, and I'm also handling our operations, including like payroll and insurance and stuff like that. And so it would probably take me maybe a day and a half or 2 days, because I know that throughout the day I'm getting calls from a variety of people and just having to handle a lot of different things. So uninterrupted 8 hours with the unavoidable interruptions just based on my current job responsibilities, probably 2 days.
Yeah, I feel like wearing a lot of hats and getting a lot of calls is just sort of seen as inevitable. Yeah. For sure. What makes plans good or bad?
So as you learn like just how to read and interpret the plans, and specifically I'm talking about like civil plans and even more specifically like grading and drainage plan. So I want to be empathetic like to the civil engineers that are designing these plans. Like I am totally ignorant of so much that goes into what they do. So like for 20 years, I've learned how to read and even hopefully in a constructive way pick apart the plans to see like where are there issues, maybe even design errors, stuff like that. But it's not for the purpose of like putting them on blast. It's like it's for the purpose of, hey, we're a part of the team just like they're a part of the team, and the engineers are actually really grateful when, especially as I not only do my takeoff and I do the bid, I'm spending a lot of time in the plan. So I'll typically find, hey, if there's an issue here or whatever. But when I build the model, the file that will actually go into our machines with the GPS systems, that's when I study the plans, because I've got to get that model right. Because if I build that model wrong and our guys like put dirt in the wrong places or take too much dirt out in other places, that's where, I mean, depending on the error, it can be tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like there's massive risk in that stuff needing to be done extremely accurately.
Yeah.
And so as I kind of comb through the plans, I typically see, what's done well and what do we need to get remediated. And so I think at the end of the day, to answer your question, the difference between good plans and plans that aren't good is the civil engineer having enough time and knowing enough in terms of just what they do to make sure that all the information on the plans is actually like buildable. Like this all makes sense. Like the water's all going to drain where it's supposed to drain. And I think just having their team put in the time to make sure that the plans have everything that we as a grading subcontractor are actually going to need to make that a reality in the field, like to actually move the dirt and make the job reality. There's plan sets that you come across where you can just immediately tell when you look at them that they're missing so much of what should be like basic information for a grading plan. And that's really the hardest thing that we're up against when it comes to the plans is incomplete plans, where there is just information and elevations and details of things that should be standard that are not there. And when we start having to try to interpret based on missing information, that's where things can get messy. And I still try to just bypass all of that by highlighting everything and essentially sending it back to the civil engineer and say, hey, we're not going to guess in these areas. I need you to help us by providing information, and obviously doing that in a way that is not like how could you be so stupid? It's more just like, hey, let's work together. Because I will say, in construction, especially in the grading construction that I've been in for the last 20 years, it's very, very common for guys in my shoes, like on the construction company side. It's like the air that we breathe is like, it's as if the contractor and the engineer are like enemies, and they talk about each other like as if like oh, that idiot designed this, or that idiot can't build this, whatever. Like it goes on both sides. And I'm just personally a fan of like, guys, we're literally on the same team. We're ultimately working for the same owner, trying to make this project reality. And just collaboration as opposed to pointing the finger type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because what you're trying to do, not only from a personal standpoint with your particular company, because going back to what you said, your margins are based on how fast you can move the dirt, how efficiently you can move the dirt. If you're not dealing with those problems beforehand, then you may have to go back to fix something. That cuts into your margins. And then not only that, you're attempting by pointing out these errors to prevent project delays and cost overruns down the line. Because as you're well aware, in commercial construction, the delays sort of stack on top of each other. As one starts to delay, then it starts backing everything up, and it just sort of cascades. So the more it can be fixed on the front end, obviously, the better everything's going to run on the back end and through the rest of the process. So we went through that. So when it comes to, say, project management, what are you all using currently?
Yeah, so what I've been using for years now is a project management software called Heavy Job. And so Heavy Job is a program that is from HCSS. So HCSS is kind of like the umbrella overall software, and HCSS has all kinds of like programs underneath their umbrella. Heavy bid is what I use for the estimating. And then whenever I am awarded a job, I'll take my heavy bid estimate and I could bring it into Heavy Job, which is their project management software. And then from there, I'll essentially create the budget for the project. And so for us as like a grading company, I'll say, hey guys, I'm assuming that it's going to take this many pieces of equipment, and like I'll even say like what pieces of equipment I think we're going to need for this particular site given the size and the type of dirt and a variety of factors, and how many operators, and this is how long I think it's going to take. And then essentially I give that budget to our like field superintendent, on-site manager, and then he's able to, with his tablet which has Heavy Job on it, essentially day to day say, hey, we had 5 guys in our crew today. Each guy was running these machines and they were able to move 3,000 cubic yards of dirt today. And so he's essentially tracking our labor, our equipment, our fuel, all kinds of stuff. And then that software, Heavy Job, I mean, it does a lot of things, but it's allowing us in real time essentially to see not just daily, but even hourly, how are we stacking up against what I had bid. And whether or not we're going to meet the budget or ideally beat the budget by coming in even underneath what I had estimated. And so that software, it helps us to track all of that. It's also helpful because there's like a daily diary type feature where our guy in the field is able to say, hey, today we were able to work 10 hours uninterrupted. And then there's the next day where it's like, hey, we worked 5 hours and then it started raining and the whole job shut down. And so now we've lost the second half of the day. And so we need to note that, because when we review the job, it's like, hey, why did we totally nosedive in terms of production on this day, the second half of the day? Check the diary. Oh, because it rained. And then one day, like maybe a key piece of equipment breaks down, and for 3 hours we're trying to get it fixed, and depending on what machine it is, the site might be at a standstill, which that unfortunately happens way more than we would want it to happen. So yeah, Heavy Job is the software that we use, though, to answer your question.
So when, say, something happens where, whether it's a rain delay or whether it's a piece of equipment breaking down, are you having to go in and into the project management software in Heavy Job and manually adjust all the schedules to push things out, or is it automatically updating that if something goes wrong?
Yeah, so it'll automatically update that stuff, because what we will have to put in is essentially how many hours did the machines run and how many hours were the guys working. And then from that raw data entry, which we do have to do at least that part, everything else is automatic in terms of evaluating, like, how are we doing in terms of the budget? Are we under budget, over budget? So a lot of it is automatic.
Got it. You were talking about how machines break down more than you want them to, obviously. Do you have any sort of, what does your, say, preventative maintenance system look like, or maintenance system in general, for keeping the machines on the job working as much as possible?
Yeah, so this is in process. What we've been trying to do is build a pretty robust database, admittedly using Excel, that essentially helps us keep track of every piece of equipment. How many hours does each machine have? That's really the big thing, is like, we talk about cars, like, well, how many miles does your car have? With machines, in terms of like how new or old are they, it's more based on how many hours. And so we're kind of in the process of having a database that shows every machine, the current hours, and then documenting all of the major services that need to happen at the various like hour markers for each type of machine. And so kind of like how we have with cars, like, hey, you should change your oil every 3,000 miles or whatever it is. With machines, there's at this amount of hours you need to do this, and then that will even vary machine to machine. Yeah, our efforts in that area are pretty like manual. Now, I will admit that like HCSS, we only have heavy bid and heavy job at this point, but they have all types of software packages. And I can't remember offhand what the name of their like machine management software package is, but they absolutely have software where that is all automated to where the machines actually have modems in them that are communicating the hours and real-time diagnostics to their software package, to where in the same way that I could go to heavy job and say, I just want to know, hey, how's the job doing? Are we beating budget? Are we not beating the budget? I can immediately log into heavy job from my computer, even if I'm not on site, and see exactly what's going on. In that same way, their machine management software, you can log in and it will literally show you on a map that's like GPS based where all their machines are, so they can literally make sure are the machines at the right sites, like spread around the city, and then click on each individual machine, and in real time it's going to tell them all the data that they would ever want to know about that machine and more.
Hell yeah.
So that's a pricey software, and we're a smaller company, and so even us kind of buying heavy bid and heavy job, usually companies our size don't make that big of a jump, but we kind of wanted it from the ground up. But on the equipment maintenance and management side, we're having to get a little creative with Excel.
Yeah, for sure. Has to make sense cost-wise. That totally makes sense. In your day-to-day, when you were trying to, say, get 8 uninterrupted hours of bidding, estimating, what are the typical calls that you're getting that are interrupting your day?
Yeah, so right now, and this obviously would be unique for every person, what I've been doing is not just the estimating, but a lot of project management as well. And so I'm getting calls from general contractors about the jobs that we are currently on doing work. And so maybe it's just them asking for an update. Maybe it's, hey, there was an issue on the plans and now we're trying to work through it with the civil engineer and the appropriate parties. And so maybe they're just wanting to talk through that. It could look like a lot of different things, because I also am helping with operations. I have like payroll conversations, I have insurance conversations, and so like for a grading company like us, we've got to have like general liability insurance, we've got to have commercial auto insurance, there's workers' comp, and so there's just these very random things that don't seem to come in any sort of particular order that I just kind of need to take care of on a day-to-day. And then honestly, most of the stuff that would take me away from just kind of being like face in the plans to do a bid is the business development, where I'm also the one, whether it's sending emails or doing some cold calling or whatever, to keep the bid invitations or RFPs, requests for proposals, coming in. And so, yeah, those are kind of touching on the variety of things that could cause me to not have the tunnel vision that I would like to have.
I understand. So let's see here. Got about 15 minutes. Let's real quickly touch on how you are currently getting leads and how you are, just say, in general, doing business development.
Yeah. So specifically with grading construction, doing what we do, moving dirt, it really does boil down to like knowing the right people. And so for us, we're trying to pursue new residential subdivisions. And so I'm thinking this could obviously vary state to state, but your major home builders are like Pulte, Meritage, Taylor Morrison, Lennar, like these are the big boys. And so at least in like Arizona, Texas, which is where a lot of the work that I've done over the last 20 years has taken place. And so I typically, when it comes to business development, have been blessed with a lot of relationships with people who are just well networked and have good reputations, know a lot of people. And so my primary means of business development is always to just kind of cut to the chase. And if I know guys that know the key people at these various home builders or the large general contractors that I'm essentially trying to get my foot in the door with. If I know people that know them, ultimately everything I'm trying to do is just to get to that person, whether it's a cell phone to have a phone call or an email address to just kind of introduce our company. And so that's always my first thing is if I know someone that can literally just give me their email and allow me to introduce myself by saying, hi, so-and-so, I'm Brett. I got your information from so-and-so with blank construction company. Not only am I like coming in with like some cred, if you will, some credentials, but like I know that they're much more likely to entertain responding to my email or phone call or text if they know that I got their info from someone that they know and respect. So that's always the most ideal for me because like if you were to think about it, like even if I went on Google and I'm like, let's just say I'm trying to find work in the Austin, Texas area, I could go to Google and type in general contractors, Austin, Texas, or new home builders, Austin, Texas, and it's going to pull up like Taylor Morrison Homes, Lennar Homes, Centex Homes, KV Homes, and I can go to those websites. Well, it's going to be nearly impossible for those types of home builders to have any contact information on the website that even gets me close to the person that I know that I need to talk to. And so I could send an email to the general contact form. I could even try calling their corporate office. The chances of me actually getting through to the person who sends out their bid RFPs to companies like ours is pretty much nil. But if I can bypass all of that through people I know that already know them, that's always the goal for sure.
Not only some of the major shifts that you're seeing in the industry right now, just say general construction, but also the common sentiments or feelings about the industry at the moment.
Yeah, I would say in this moment, based on the current presidency, at least in like the market that I'm in, there was a lot of excitement prior to this presidency that there would be a lot more work, whether it was new residential projects, new commercial projects. And at least what I've experienced so far is what we thought was coming in terms of just like this wave of work, at least as it relates to like our type of construction that involves the grading, has not been there. And so honestly, like in our market right now, it's pretty stressful. There are several companies that I'm aware of where like a lot of the jobs that we're bidding appear to be jobs that are real. Like they appear to have an owner who has the money either in hand or the financing kind of locked down, and they've picked their general contractor, they've picked their engineering team, and you'll kind of go through this whole process of like learning about the job, bidding the job, maybe even being verbally awarded the job and being told, hey, this job is going to start in 3 weeks or whatever it is. And the amount of times where that scenario is playing out and the job either continues to get pushed back or even just evaporates completely, it's so common now that I would say there's just an air of like discomfort right now where it's hard to tell like what jobs are actually real, what jobs in terms of even bidding are worth like investing time in. And when you're trying to break into like some of these guys that still have the large jobs, like I'm talking about home builders and general contractors, where it can be difficult is those guys typically already have their favorite subcontractors. And unless you come in stupid cheap to where you're essentially buying the job, there's almost no chance that, especially when the economy is in a rougher condition like it is right now, at least as it relates to our work, unless you come in really, really low, it's going to be really hard to break in with the guys that actually have the work. And so, yeah, I would say that it's probably not inaccurate to say, as it relates to the grading construction industry right now, that there is some fear and discouragement due to the overall lack of work and the legitimacy of the work that is even out there to bid. Because there's still, I mean, I've got emails coming to my inbox through all these different websites, Procore, Building Connected, like so many different websites where these general contractors are soliciting bids through. And so my inbox is full of them. The problem is as you start to dive into them and even bid a lot of them, they end up not being real. Or it's like, oh yeah, this is actually just a budget and we're not even going to consider this job for 6 to 12 months.
Would you say that wasting time on bids that aren't actually going to be real jobs would be the most frustrating part of your job currently?
It is a sore spot. Where it's complicated is some of these jobs, they're transparent with you on the front side that it's still like in a budget phase. And a lot of the jobs, I mean, I'm just thinking back over 20 years now, there have been jobs where I bid during the initial budget phase and then I bid it again as the plans got a little bit better, but it was still budgetary. And I mean, there have been jobs where I've bid it over and over and over again, sometimes to the point where it's like, this is insane, and have actually won those jobs. And I mean, I'm thinking of one job. I worked for a company in Arizona where we were working on this bid again and again and again for probably a year and a half. We won the job. Our bid alone was like $21 million. So was the budgeting worth it? Obviously, it was worth it. And so I say that to say, yes, it can be annoying when it's people who really have no intention of actually like giving you a fair shot to the job and you're essentially providing free consulting. That's when it's kind of a sore spot. Or if you put all the legwork into it and they won't give you any feedback. Like tell me if you got 5 bids and I just put 10 hours into this bid, tell me like, am I competitive? Like you don't have to tell me their numbers. Like I'm just trying to understand like where do I land overall in terms of what we just provided to you. And so if they're not willing to communicate when you've done that legwork for them, or they're intentionally misleading you, saying the job is about to go when it's not even close to actually being real yet, that's frustrating. When we're budgeting towards something that we know could have a massive payoff, then that's obviously a totally different scenario, and we're all about that.
For sure. Just going to do 2 more questions. One, because this podcast is intended to be around how AI may end up being used in construction, not in the distant future, because, you hear talks about, eyeglasses and, augmented reality and all that, but that's still far away. But this podcast is going to be far more about what's usable in 2025 and 2026. In what ways, if any, are you using AI currently in your role?
Yeah, so I have started to dabble, even just asking ChatGPT, like, hey, I'm a co-owner of a grading subcontracting company in this area that typically does this volume of work in a year. I'm trying to reach out to these types of clients. What would you suggest I do? And have just kind of seen like, okay, what is ChatGPT going to spit out in terms of like for me to pursue leads? And so that actually has been helpful, and it's definitely given me ideas that I would not have had prior to just kind of doing that sort of basic stuff. Where my mind is even going in this conversation, because I literally had not thought of this until you are like asking these questions. Like one of the things that I have to do is when I bid a job and we win it, then we ultimately are going to have to sign a subcontract with the general contractor that we're working for. And these subcontract agreements, I mean, dude, they can be a beatdown. They could be 30, 40, 50 pages of lawyer speech that I have to go through and read this whole thing to make sure that when we sign up to do this job, that we're protected as a company, and that they're not going to, because we've signed this contract, be able to turn every additional expense on us. And so even just the thought of like uploading a PDF of a subcontract agreement that I need to review into ChatGPT and saying, hey, here are the main types of things that I'm trying to find whether or not this subcontract has in it, because there are certain things where we're not going to sign it if they're in there. And so even just getting ChatGPT's help to do a review of a subcontract so that I can hopefully like get help with some of the glaring things that need to be addressed and negotiated with the general contractor that we're working with. So the other thought that came to mind is like my bids are typically 4 pages long, and 3 of the 4 pages are what we call like inclusions and exclusions and clarifications. And they're all there for a reason, because if I don't have them there, then someone's going to try to make us pay for something that we shouldn't have to pay for. But it would be nice to kind of upload one of my estimates into ChatGPT and just see what it would do in terms of, hey, help me make this as simple and as streamlined as possible, where to where we're still protected. It says enough, but it's not redundant and it doesn't say too much, because I know that when you're a general contractor and you're having to review all these different bids from all these different grading guys, like if someone's got a 4-page proposal and it's got all this fine print, if you will, even though like we're not trying to pull anything over on anyone, we're just trying to protect ourselves. Maybe AI could help me clean all of that up and just make it more simple, so that the general contractor we're bidding to is like, man, this is just refreshingly concise type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you see those agreements that are like 30 to 40 pages long that you have to read through, how long does it usually take you to go through those?
Well, usually I'll take an hour to lay down under my desk and cry about having to look at that subcontract. Yeah, honestly, man. So that's one of those things we talk about, like all the different hats that I wear and kind of the distractions that are inevitable. When it's like contract time, it's literally phone on silent, everything kind of, it's like I go on airplane mode in a sense. And if it's a 30-page agreement, I mean, I'm not the fastest reader, and like contracts are like a thorn in my flesh. And so it's probably going to take me 2 to 3 hours with a highlighter and a pen, sitting to the side where I can't see my email. My phone is flipped upside down, to actually go through it and read it to make sure that, yeah, I catch everything I need to catch. Because the worst thing that could happen is I just skim through it or rush through it, we sign it, and then all of a sudden our business is in a situation where there's a major cost issue and they're pointing the finger at us, and lo and behold, there was something that I needed to catch that I didn't catch, and then that's ultimately on my shoulders, and I don't want that. So, but yeah, at least 2 to 3 hours if it was even just a 30-page subcontract agreement, to make sure that I don't miss anything.
For sure. Last question. I would say that in construction, there's often, especially with consumers, but I think even between subcontractors and general contractors, there's often mistrust, and there's sometimes misalignment of values, or at least a perceived misalignment of values. So my question to you, last question, would be, what are your non-negotiable values when working with GCs and other contractors?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, unfortunately, in our industry, especially the heavy civil and the grading, I mean, it is very, very common for people to do things in ways that I would just say are shady, if not illegal. And so one of the reasons that I think we have been successful in some ways, and even just something that I try to do regardless of who I work for, is to be honest and transparent and upfront, to the point where, let's say I'm bidding a job and I've come across like something that could have a major cost impact for the project and the general contractor and even the owner. And even if I know that they're leaning towards using someone else and not us, I'll still say, hey guys, I know that you're leaning towards XYZ contractor. I still want you guys to be aware of these things, because if those guys don't catch this and you don't catch this, this could have a massive impact on y'all's project, your company. And so trying to just do the right thing regardless of whether or not it's actually going to benefit us. Now, do I hope in putting that forth to them that they're going to be like, man, we should really give these guys another shot? Of course I do. But yeah, just being transparent, and even the amount of times recently where let's just say that we've made a mistake or we missed something on the plans. Like, it's inevitable. I make mistakes, obviously. Like, when I am telling a general contractor that we're working for, hey, I messed up, I did this, or I missed this, the amount of times that on the backside of me just simply confessing that I am in the wrong, I'm the one that made the mistake, they almost don't even know what to do with me. They're like, no one does that. They're like, people don't just, there's always a justification. There's always a reason why it was someone else's fault. And I personally and the guys that I work with, we're just very big fans of, if we are the ones in the wrong, just say you're in the wrong. Don't qualify it. Don't justify it. Like, don't try to make it sound a little bit better than it is. Just say, I was 100% wrong for this. Here's what I want to do moving forward to try to help. Like, what do you want to do type thing? And I mean, even as basic as that is, when I interact with general contractors, and I just, honestly, I think you could summarize it as simply operating with integrity. Like, that blows people's minds.
I would agree.
Yeah, kind of points to how the shady side is just like, I mean, it's like the air we breathe. It's so common that people don't even know what to do with integrity.
Well, Brett, I'm not going to take up any much more of your time. I really appreciate you being the first guest on this podcast. You're a great dude, and I'm excited to see where you move forward in your future.
Thank you, man. I'm honored to be here with you and appreciate you, and super excited to see what you do with this.
Awesome. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.